to warrant top-tier constructed play unless it's especially good against your opponent, like you just mentioned against Supreme Verdict decks. I think a large piece of the puzzle against most strategies are going to involve turning it on reliably. Now, that said, a deck like Black-White Aggro is full with a lot of double mana symbols and a lot of cheap permanents. So turning it on in Justin's deck is not that challenging.
VanMeter begins with an Elvish Mystic off of Forest to get round one started. McWhorter does draw his card. We'll see exactly how he wants to start things off. He has a basic Plains. Does he have a 1-drop to go along with it? It looks like the answer is yes, and it's going to be a Hopeful Eidolon. Limited All-Star, looking to try to make its way into Constructed as VanMeter does draw a copy of Full of Chronos.
And now, again, Justin's playing with creatures like this to try to make Ethereal Armor more powerful in this list. And this is our first Mana Confluence deck here. Justin playing 3 copies to enable, he's got a lot of double white and a lot of double black on cheap permanents, and so 3 copies show up in his list, something that would not have been possible a couple weeks ago, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we're going to be taking a look at over the course of the weekend, too, is just looking at people's mana bases and seeing exactly what directions they've gone in. As VanMeter's going to play an Overgrown Tomb tapped, then play a Scavenging Ooze before passing the turn back over to McWhorter. You take a look at VanMeter's mana base here. He's got 4 Temple of Abandon. You're not going to find Temple of Malady in his deck list. Honestly, he's kind of his deck seems like a relic of the past. There isn't a lot of new stuff going on here. And that's a conscious decision by him, because obviously he knows the new cards that he can play, and he's just choosing not to.
Sometimes it's good when there's some uncertainty about what the metagame is going to be like to just go with powerful creatures and powerful removal spells. It's hard to miss by too much.
Okay. This is an Ethereal Armor on the Hopeful Eidolon. That's going to make that a 3/3. Now we have, okay then.
Oh.
So we do an enchantment count. That's 3. So this is an attack here for, it looks like 5 or 6. I think it's 5. Actually, no, 6. Oops. 7.
7.
7.
It's a lot.
Goodness. I can't count this high this early in the morning. Well, Chris, how about a Dreadbore? I recommend you find one right now. Now, you do see there is one in his hand along with the Mysium Mortars. I think the problem here is the lack of red mana, Patrick.
Yeah, and a lot of his sources of red mana do come into play tapped as well. So it's not only finding it, but it's finding it in time. And Chris does not have very much time right now. What a way to start off the morning if you're Chris, huh?
Yeah, not to mention 7 life gain there for Justin, so... An interesting strategy. You mentioned the enchantments that are in his deck. Of course, we talked about Ethereal's Gnarled Scarhide also in his deck as well. Eidolon Countless Battles. So Ethereal Armor is actually very, very good in his deck.
Yeah, it's one of the more powerful cards in Standard. Obviously, the deck building cost is very high. You have to be building a ton of enchantments. But now, with the full Theros block release, there's no end of reasonable enchantment creatures to choose from. So Ethereal Armor can start getting played potentially outside of conventional Hexproof plus creature enchantment shells.
Full of Chronos does come down for VanMeter before passing the turn back. It looks like Scavenging Ooze may be on chump blocking duty here this turn, as McWhorter did draw a Godless Shrine for the turn. We'll see what his third turn is going to be in just a moment. But he's off to a beautiful start thus far.
Yeah, no real incentive for Chris to get in for 2 on that turn with Justin all the way up to 27. And for all he knows, Chris could be facing down a lethal attack this turn. So he's got to start playing a little bit of defense.
Godless Shrine is going to come into play tap to start things off. 1 white mana. This is a copy of Hopeful Eidolon. That'll pump up the other one, of course. So now +4/+4 on each of those Ethereal Armors. This is going to be an attack here for 9. And you have to imagine VanMeter, yeah, he's going to block with that Scavenging Ooze. If it wasn't attacking last turn, chances are it's blocking. That's exactly what it's going to do. Justin will gain 9 life, push himself up to 36.
Especially with Justin showing black mana this turn, you now have to play around the possibility of him having removal spells as well, so you have to get in your chump blocks when you can.
See if VanMeter can find a red mana. He does. It's a copy of Stomping Ground. We talked about how he doesn't have a ton of untapped red mana. Well, he found one. And I think he's more than willing to pay 2 life to get that into play.
Yeah, and this opens up a very good turn of him being able to use Dreadbore on Justin's Eidolon with all the enchantments on it, use Palakranos to finish off the other Eidolon, and clean up the board entirely.
Now, of course, the fear here for VanMeter is maybe a card like Brave the Elements, but at the same time, can he afford to play around Brave the Elements? Probably not.
No, all of his removal spells are sorceries, so I can understand wanting to jockey a little bit. Maybe you lead off by using Palakranos to fight. Maybe you can induce the Brave the Elements that way, but I don't think Chris has much of a choice here except to play into it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what he's going to do, as you did mention. He's going to start off with Palakranos fighting, going to take care of the Hopeful Eidolon. McWhorter, because it is a fight, he is going to gain a life and go up to 37. And now VanMeter will probably play that Stomping Ground untapped, thinking that, okay, well, chances are the coast is clear, or I don't really have much of a choice. I'll go down to 11, try to Dreadbore this thing. And it is going to work. So Dreadbore's going to take care of that. Ethereal Armors will go to the graveyard as well, and now Pulachronos is going to come in for 6 points of damage, knocking McWhorter down to 31.
Now, this turn was very bad for Justin, of course, but he's gained so much life that he has a lot of time to find a way to reassemble a board or simply race the Pulachronos.
You see VanMeter, he's got a Force and a Mizian Mortars left in his hand. That's it. So he's kind of all in at this point. Obviously, we'll get some draw steps here, but it looks like McWhorter does have a Herald of Torment in his hand. So VanMeter has the answer ready for that. But it's on Pulachronos to get the job done right now. You see McWhorter's hand. All he's got left is a Godless Shrine and a Mutavault.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty quick clock that Chris is going to be able to put together here.
And Xenagos will speed it up a little bit, too, as that was the draw for the turn. He does have the Reveler in his deck, not the God of Revels. Does not have access to any of those on this particular week, and a card that has really fallen out of favor in these Monsters decks.
It was very popular, I think, early on in the season, as it's quite powerful in the mirror match. But as time went on and the mirror match became less and less prevalent, I think Xenagos, the God, became a little less justified in those lists.
And VanMeter going to start here by tapping 4 mana. Looks like he's going to lead off with Xenagos. Able to simply plus this, get his mana, cast Mizian Mortars, take care of the Herald of Torment, and now push in for 7 points of damage. So McWhorter, after damage is dealt, is going to go down to 24. And again, VanMeter obviously has a very nice board position here, but now he's without any removal, so McWhorter could still assemble something large here and really turn this game around. But his draw this turn was just a Plains to go along with a Godless Shrine. He does play his Mutavault, and he'll be passing the turn back. One thing about Green-Red Monsters, or Jund Monsters, it does close pretty quickly.
Yeah, the deck is capable of putting together a lot of pressure pretty quickly. You have big threats, Stormbreath Dragon, not hard to generate lethal. I mean, we're talking Justin at 37 life and maybe dying in 4 turns here, with Chris not having even that advanced of a board. So
Xenagos is going to put a Satyr into play. The VanMeter did just draw Blood Crypt for the turn to go along with the Force that's already there, so I think he's trying to figure out exactly how to attack in the face of that Mutavault. Probably doesn't want to send that Elvish Mystic in, so it looks like he's going to send in with just the World Eater and the Satyr token. This will be an attack here for 8. We'll see if McWhorter has any blocks.
for those of you curious, Justin's list in terms of main deck removal spells, you're looking at 2 copies of Banishing Light.
That's it?
No Banisher Priest, no Doom Blades, just 2 copies of Banishing Light.
Ah, okay.
His strategy is so enchantment heavy that it sort of necessitates him playing things like Oblivion Ring.
Sure. McWhorter does draw his card for the turn. Looks like that may have been a copy of Banishing Light. Our first of what will likely be many of that card, both this weekend and moving forward.
Yeah, Oblivion Ring, no slouching constructed. Right now, the way that many decks try to fight blue, white, and Esper strategies is by overloading with Planeswalkers, and so some decks will definitely be in the market for Detention Spheres 5 through X, and then non-blue white decks can also just play this in lieu of Detention Sphere.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like we were not without an Oblivion Ring-esque effect for very long. Obviously, Detention Sphere hung around, but Banishing Light providing this, kind of help for a lot of different decks, which is kind of nice. D-Sphere, incredibly powerful card. But this one, I mean, it has its ups and its downs, its benefits and its gains. So even though they are very similar cards, they're different in a lot of respects too.
Well, the biggest thing to me is just what's the opportunity cost of playing with enchantments. We're going to be looking at a format where things like main deck Revoke Existence or main deck Deicide are going to be reasonable metagame calls a lot of the time. So are you better off playing a card like this or, say, Banisher Priest in your white-based aggro deck? Maybe this card's a little bit more efficient at answering things, but you don't open yourself up to main deck enchantment removal.
VanMeter does draw another copy of Pulachronos for the turn. Obviously not going to cast that. Just going to serve in again here for 8 points of damage. We'll see if McWhorter has any interest in blocking this go-around, as his Banishing Light did take care of Xenagos last turn. Obviously there is some risk to this block, Warcline Rampager, things of that nature, but those don't seem like cards that he can play around at this point, as he's under so much pressure. So Mutavault will trade with the Satyr token. 6 damage will come across here from Pulachronos. McWhorter going to go down to 10.
Yeah. Justin's struggling enough to keep up with the board, so I think he's entering territory where he can no longer play around things.
VanMeter going to pass the turn back over to Justin, who will take a draw here. Looks like it's a copy of Athreos, and this is where you kind of see part of the problem with this card, where there are definitely board positions where it's fantastic, but right now it's essentially a dead draw. As you see, VanMeter picks up the die, expecting Pulachronos to die, but that's not the case. It's just an Athreos and passing the turn back.
This is my big concern with this card. I know it's got a lot of hype. The text box is powerful, but it feels like it's going to be pretty underwhelming in games that you're losing.
Yeah. Course of Krufix, the draw here for VanMeter. He'll turn over a copy of Domri. So that'll be his draw next turn, assuming we do make it to the next turn, as an attack here for 7 is going to put McWhorter down to 3. And VanMeter will just happily pass the turn back with an additional copy of Pulachronos in his hand.
It's also fascinating to me how much of the community is behind Athreos when the same segments of the community really dog on the Punisher cards.
Yeah, that's true.
It has a lot of that same element. You know, your opponent is controlling it. You get whatever your opponent deems to be the worst half. But for some reason, Athreos reads like all upside, and the Punisher cards read like I'm giving my opponent a choice. Or the tribute cards, rather, in Born of the Gods.
Sure. VanMeter does take down game number 1, as McWhorter knew that he was basically on a no-outer there. Doesn't even take the time to draw the card, just does concede the game. So, number 2 on our Star City Games Season 2 leaderboard. Starts off with a win this morning. We'll look at the sideboards here. You've got black-white in front of you. What do you see there for help?
4 copies of Zathler Necromancer, 4 copies of Boros Elite, 4 copies of Thoughtseize, 2 copies of Master of the Feast, and 1 God's End.
Okay.
I suspect that the Zathler Necromancer, Boros Elite, Thoughtseize type of package is for when Justin's playing against Supreme Verdict decks, needs to get away from this creature enchantment thing that isn't going to be very effective. So it can just become a normalized black-white humans deck in that world. I think Master of the Feast is going to come in here. We were actually talking about this in the hotel room last night, where I think this card is very well positioned against green-red monster decks. 5 toughness is a critical flashpoint for surviving things like Mizian Mortars and Stormbreath Dragon. And being black makes it durable to certain removal spells as well. Flying is very good against monster strategies because of Courser and Sylvan Caryatid and other effective blockers. It's a little bit worse against Jund, of course. Chris is equipped with some number of Dreadbore type effects. But I think against the green-red lists, it's going to be very good. And I expect it to even do good work against the Jund lists, even though they can kill it with some percentage of cards in their deck.
Yeah, I mean, it just forces them to have a Dreadbore at the right time. Now, of course, Master will provide a couple of draw steps to help them get there, but if they don't find it in time, it puts a lot of pressure on them, either finding Dreadbore or having the right combination with a card like Domri.
Especially if you're incorporating other cards.
Yeah.
Justin isn't really going down this road, but if you're playing Master of the Feast alongside, Painseer and Mogus Marauder and removal spells, if you're pressuring them in other places, that could be a really powerful strategy against monster decks, potentially.
I would take a look at VanMeter's sideboard here. Again, you're not going to see a lot of new cards here. 2 copies of Putrefy, of Vraska the Unseen, 2 Thoughtseize, a Mizian Mortars, a Chandra Pyromaster, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Abrupticate, 3 Mistcutter Hydra, and a Sire of Insanity. So as far as new Journey into Nyx cards in this deck, I think we've got the Donut.
Not even a green-black temple?
No.
We couldn't even get that in there?
No, we still have the Temple of Malice, the red-black one, so we don't even have... He's actually just on the Donut as far as new cards are concerned. The newest card in Chris's deck list is Putrefy.
And we saw a list like this, not like this, but having that same element when the Nashville Open, week 1 with Born of the Gods.
Yeah.
Mono Blue Devotion, no new cards. I think in week 1 it's reasonable to anticipate a very creature-oriented metagame. People are going to be trying out new stuff. Most of the Journey into Nyx enablers are for creature strategies, by and large. And so why not play something that has an effective game plan against a variety of creature decks? Pulachronos is not a bad week 1 card.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, that's exactly the strategy it seems like Chris is employing. Also, let's not forget, too, that Chris is very familiar with this archetype. He's been playing Monsters variants for some time now. As far as cards that can come in for him, I expect to see Putrefy come in, just an additional removal spell that can take care of a large creature like we saw in Game 1. Might be a little bit better than Mizian Mortars, as Mizian Mortars is a little more conditional, even though Putrefy is a little bit more expensive. You got to love Golgari Charm. You got to love Abrupticate in this matchup. So that's an easy 6 cards to bring in. Not exactly sure what he's going to want to board out in this situation. He only does have 1 Mizian Mortars in his main deck. Maybe he feels that a card like Xenagos the Reveler might be a little bit weaker against this strategy, but the cards that he is bringing in are very, very high impact cards.
Yeah, more removal spells, more enchantment removal.
Yeah.
Again, a good reason why Jund Monsters is a good choice in week 1. You just have a sideboard with a lot of flexibility for a lot of different matchups.
VanMeter going to take a moment here. Looks like he's got a judge question. If we can find out exactly what that judge question is, we'll certainly let you guys know. But if you are joining us, it is early this morning, but we do appreciate you guys. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, StarCityGames.com Open Series here in Cincinnati, Ohio, home of the best chili in the world.
I did not know this.
Yes, Skyline chili is a wonderful delicacy
that
I had yesterday. So, at SCG Live, hashtag SCGCIN for your tweets all weekend long as we have the first tournament with Journey into Nyx, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, particularly given that, Standard has been dominated by 3 decks to varying degrees since Theros was released.
Yeah.
new content means the possibility of that getting shaken up a little bit, at least for a little while. And so this is a very exciting tournament to set the stage for what the rest of the standard season is going to look like.
I mean, this is going to be, again, this particular tournament, we're going to see, some brews, I feel like. The top 8, hopefully, and I think chances are very high, it's just going to be different than what we've been seeing over the past couple of, weeks or months. 4 mono black devotion decks and things like that. We're going to see some different decks and some people just trying some different things, and we'll see how things go. I didn't know what Chris was playing coming into this weekend. I'm not too surprised to see him playing this type of strategy just because this is what he does. I'm a little bit surprised not to see very many new cards in the strategy because there are some options available to him. But at the same time, I mean, you can certainly make an argument of just kind of going with what you know. You don't have to get too fancy in week 1.
I think there's a lot of risk to messing around with a mana base for low upside.
Sure.
If you're comfortable, you know that you can cast your spells with the mana base that you have and scry a reasonable percentage of the time. I don't think I would devote a lot of energy to trying to see if I could squeeze another Temple into the deck.
But you have to believe that Temple of Malady is going to see quite a bit of play, not only this weekend, but just moving forward. That is the Temple that everyone has been waiting for, up to and including Brian Kibler, and that card is going to just facilitate a lot of strategies moving forward.
Reed Duke said one of the inspiration for the junk list he's been playing was he wants to play with Abrupt Decay. He feels that Abrupt Decay is one of the very few cards in the format that's good against control decks and good against aggressive decks.
Sure.
A Temple that facilitates Abrupt Decay certainly has a home in Standard.
So VanMeter will be on the draw. McWhorter will be on the play. He's taking a look at his hand. And it looks like VanMeter's going to send it back. I don't think he would keep if he could keep those 11 cards. So he'll go down to 6. You see the 2 next to Chris VanMeter's name. He is number 2 on our Open Series leaderboard right now. A lot of players in attendance here. Again, Brian Braun to win. He's number 1. VanMeter's number 2. Lisette from California is number 3. If you didn't read the write-up by Nick Miller, he did a fantastic job covering Joe Lisette, so you guys can find out more about him. A player from the California area. I know you're very familiar with him, as I know you do live out there. You guys aren't in the same area per se, but pretty close. Known for his legacy play, and I'm sure we'll see him a lot tomorrow, but oddly enough, he has won 2 standard opens as well.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Sometimes the narratives that surround players sort of go past what the reality is. Joe's, of course, a fantastic legacy player, mostly with counterbalance strategies, but he's done a lot of damage in standard portions during the Open Series as well. He has to have a pretty diverse portfolio. I mean, he was the first overall seed of the Invitational very recently. So,
and, basically what he said is that he came, when we were in Dallas, he came based off of the fact that he had like some miles and with the Invitational, he top 8'd, he had some flying trouble, so he got a voucher, all of that stuff. Decided to come to Dallas, and he's like, okay, if I do well here, I'll travel for season 2. And he got second place in Legacy Open. So now he kind of got hooked in. When you were in Detroit, I know he was there as well. Now he's here this weekend. He's going to stay with one of his buddies on the East Coast after this tournament is over, and we'll see him in Nashville next weekend too. So pretty cool to see him traveling, and pretty cool to see the top 3 players on our season 2 leaderboard here and in attendance. As McWhorter is going to start with a Godless Shrine into Gnarled Scarhide. VanMeter with just a Stomping Ground as game 2 is underway.
And keep in mind that number 2 next to Chris's name is effectively a number 1.
Yeah.
As the player in first, Brian Ronduin, has already locked up an invitation to the Players' Championship.
Yeah, the reason we keep him on the leaderboard is because having those 2 buys in Invitationals is very important. So we don't want to remove his name, and I'm sure Brian doesn't want to have his name removed either. Can't forget about BBD.
No.
Scarhide comes across for 2. VanMeter's going to go down to 18. This is a hopeful Eidolon and just passing the turn back. So, one thing that people haven't really mentioned, oddly enough, is that with, a lot of the new cards, people haven't really talked about just like Enchantment Creature Beatdown. And that's exactly what McWhorter's that's what his deck basically is. Again, he's got Herald of Torment, Hopeful Eidolon, Gnarled Scarhide, Athreos, Eidolon in Countless Battles, Ethereal Armor to pump all of those guys up. So he's kind of an Enchantment Creature Beatdown deck, which we haven't really seen people discuss yet.
Yeah, Eidolon in Countless Battles is especially exciting for a list like this, potentially.
Yeah. And that card hasn't got talked about a lot very much. It seems like, that's one of those cards that's really powerful that's just been waiting for a home.
It's definitely priced to move. I mean, the numbers on that card are quite good.
McWhorter going to play a plane, so he's come across here for 3. VanMeter's going to go down a little bit further to 15. McWhorter will gain a life. He'll go up to 19. We'll see what his follow-up play is going to be. He's tapping 3 mana. This is a copy of Godsend. VanMeter's going to take a look, and we'll do the exact same at the brand new equipment here.
Not a card I anticipated seeing a lot of play.
It's the camps are definitely split one way or the other on this card. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it, and compare it to Volshock Battle Gear. I think that's a little bit better than that and somewhere in between.
I'm much more on the Volshock Battle Gear camp than the this is very powerful camp.
Well, how about this? It's got great artwork.
It does have great artwork.
How about that?
And I think it has the potential to be pretty good this game. Chris is going to have to trade removal spells for small creatures that Justin's able to generate. Anything that's able to get God's End on is a very large threat.
Yeah. VanMeter does untap that Blood Crypt. He takes a draw here. He's looking for a card like Vulgary Charm, maybe like Abrupt Decay. You see a Vraska in his hand. That's an expensive form of both of the cards I did just mention. Also does have a Domri in his hand, but Domri isn't ideal in this particular situation, so he's certainly in some trouble here. Gonna play a Stomping Ground untapped to begin. This is a Domri. So he's gonna tick that up, maybe use that for maybe a Fog for this particular turn, but he did have to pay 2 to actually even be able to cast it. And one of the things about Chris's deck too is that even though Jund Monsters does have a good mana base, it's a painful one.
Yes.
And with people playing aggressive strategies, or at least we assume that people are going to be trying aggressive strategies because of mana confluence, he can lose some percentage points in matchups just because he has to do something like he did last turn, which is pay 2 to be able to cast a spell on time.
And that's not even talking about the temples, which means that often he can't even cast his spells on time.
Yeah. And he does have 5 temples in his deck, 4 Temple of Abandon, and then 1 copy of Temple of Malice. As McWhorter is going to untap, he's going to take a draw here. Looks like he picked up an Eidolon of Countless Battles. We'll see how he wants to take his turn.
Eidolon, a very powerful draw here.
Yeah. Really do like that card. I mean, that's a card where once that card is good, and I think once people start playing that card, it's going to be, I think no one's going to be surprised. No one's going to be taken by surprise that Eidolon is like, oh, wow, that card is really powerful. It's just this card that's been just hiding in the shadows, biding its time, waiting for the right format to be good in and waiting for the right pieces to be unveiled. Maybe Journey to the Nyx provided those.
White creature decks have so much competition in the 3 mana slot, and that's the biggest problem. You're comparing it to Spear of Heliod, Ajani, Banisher Priest, Vermaz. There's a lot of competition for that slot.
Equip of God's End will occur here on the Hopeful Eidolon. So 4 life is certainly going to be gained. Gnarled Scarhide is going to go one way. God's End will go the other. There goes the Domri. Damage will be dealt to VanMeter. He's going to go down to 11. McWhorter will gain 4 up to 23. And pass the turn back will Justin over to Chris, who will draw a card. It's a copy of Mizium Mortars. Not so bad.
Chris can fire off some removal spells this turn, but again, 2 Mutavaults in play. There's a God's End in play. Justin can generate a lot of pressure, even if most of his creatures are targeted with removal spells.
Step 1 is Mortars, taking care of the Hopeful Eidolon. Step 2 looks like a Dreadbore potentially to take care of the Gnarled Scarhide. Of course, you did see that VanMeter does have to pay 2 to take care of that. Again, these Ravnica Shocklands, obviously they're fantastic, but they're at a cost.
And what a depressing set of creatures to use 2 removal spells on, huh?
How dare you talk about them that way? Those creatures are fantastic. They've been getting a lot of work done.
I'm not saying Chris made a mistake. You got to do what you got to do. But that is depressing targets for a Mizium Mortars and a Dreadbore.
Swamp going to come into play here for McWhorter. See if he wants to fire at Mutavaults. Does he want to play the Eidolon? He's definitely got some options available to him, and you got to believe that he feels like he's in the driver's seat right now.
He has just with God's End and the Mutavaults, he has a 2-turn clock.
Yeah.
He can go animate, equip, hit you for 5, and then put you to the test. Again, Chris can't even generate. He can't even cast blockers because God's End just removes them permanently.
Yep.
So he's essentially only finding Abrupt Decay at that spot. And Justin still has other spells left over in his hand, so a really commanding position.
See if McWhorter wants to add anything to his board or just take the line that you mentioned. He's actually going to go this way. He's going to fire up 2 Mutavaults and come across here for 4 points of damage. VanMeter going to go down to 5. And looks like, I assume if he's doing that, then he's got to follow play, and he does. It's a Hopeful Eidolon, so he's going to maximize his mana this particular turn instead of just fire at Mutavault, equipping, and putting him down to 4.
Yeah, this is still representing a lethal attack next turn in a variety of ways, so I like this play from Justin.
VanMeter draws his card. It's a copy of Elvish Mystic. You can see VanMeter's hand, 2 copies of Stormbreath Dragon of Vraska, and now a Concession. So Justin McWhorter is going to even things up here against Chris VanMeter. Black-White Aggro does take down game number 2 against Jund Monsters, and you can see part of the problem with Jund Monsters and being a 3-color deck in general. VanMeter had to take 4 points of damage from his lands that game. And when you're playing against aggressive strategies, and we think we're going to see a lot more of those this particular weekend and moving forward because of mana confluence, you might have to change things around. Maybe you have to just be green-red monsters and be 2 colors instead.
Yeah, well, the metagame's aggressive. That's certainly a consideration. It's also worth noting in that game that Chris did not find any of his mana accelerants. And I think Jund Monsters really struggles in the games where it doesn't have an Elvish Mystic or a Sylvan Caryatid. Chris died that game with multiple 5-mana spells in his hand. He didn't really do anything on the early turns. He didn't actually impact the board until the 4th turn. You could argue the Domri just absorbed some damage and went on its way. So I think the mana accelerants are really key to this deck.
Looks like VanMeter's going to change some things up in sideboarding here as he's going back to the well while Justin's pretty happy with his configuration. I wouldn't be surprised if the first card that he's grabbing is Vraska. It just seems a little bit slow in the matchup.
Get out of here.
Well, yeah, if you 5 mana, I can't do that. Get that thing out of here. It's essentially a 5 mana removal spell. And while, there's more text to go along with that card, you saw in that particular game where, 5 mana might take a little too long to get to, especially when you're dealing yourself damage.
I've played a variety of aggressive strategies, and whenever my opponent has cast a Vraska in a post-board game, I have thought, what do you think is going on in this game?
Yeah.
What do you think this game is about? It's certainly not about 5 mana, remove your Loyal Pegasus or whatever it is that card is generating here. It's a little bit different in this matchup, I think, because Justin has a lot of interlocking pieces.
Sure.
So you can imagine Vraska being higher upside because not only are you killing a creature, but you're potentially killing a creature with some creature enchantments on it or some such. But I still think that it is a little bit slow for the way these games are going to play out.
Stephen Wise on Twitter asked us, Patrick, which are we more excited about? New Standard Brews today in Cincinnati or Game 7s of the NBA playoffs?
Game 7 of the NBA playoffs.
I was going to say both. I think I have an equal level of excitement. Week 1, when a new format comes out, I actually am just generally very excited. For whatever reason, the one tournament I kind of remember when a new set came out was when Wolf Run Ramp was debuted.
Yes.
I remember this very vividly of just wow, this guy is casting Primeval Titan, and we didn't think that was a thing anymore because Valakut's gone, and he's getting Inkmoth Nexus and Kestig. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yes, that is cool.
Whenever something like that happens where someone who you don't even think of, it's not like Jerry Thompson or, some name player doing this. It's just kind of like a random guy who's just like, I have found these combination of cards that are fantastic, and no one has thought of this, so I get to take this tournament by storm. And also, I get to have a long-lasting impact on the rest of the standard format because I have found this shell that is insane.
It's one of the cool things when the Open Series gets to debut things. Often the standard formats are defined by Pro Tours, and so there's a lot of work put into them and a lot of talent. But getting to see lesser-known players have their own shot at defining standard, at least for a little while, is very cool.
But Steven, make no mistake about it. We are very excited for all the Game 7s that will be taking place as well, as both players will be taking a look at their opening hands here. VanMeter will be on the play after he got demolished in game number 2. We'll see if he's able to keep this. You see McWhorter looking at the exact same thing here. He's got a decision to make on his end, too.
Looks like a hand with multiple copies of Mana Confluence.
We could see this happen. This could be the danger. Mana Confluence, as powerful as it is, it's not free, as VanMeter's going to pay 2 to play an Elvish Mystic, so he's off to a really, really nice start. You see he's got a copy of Golgari Charm in his hand as well. Not sure if he has the black mana yet to get things going, but he's got to be happy with at least how things have begun.
The Mana Accelerant is so key for Jund monsters.
Yeah. See, he's got a Temple of Abandon, a Domri. Looks like a Courser over there as well, so he looks like he's pretty happy. McWhorter. Well, what are you going to play? This is a Godless Shrine tapped and just passing the turn back. If you're Chris, you got to be pretty happy about that. Visium Mortar's the draw picked up here for Chris.
Yeah, the games, Justin, last game at least, the game that he won, got off the ground very fast.
Domri going to come into play on turn number 2. Take a look at the top card. You're going to leave it there as it's not a creature. Pass it back over to Justin, who will take a draw here. You see a Mutavault in his hand, among other things.
And if Chris has any creature that he's able to find of reasonable size, I think this is going to be a tough opening for Justin to compete with because Chris has so many implied removal spells because of the Domri.
Yeah. This is a Hero of Arios. Haven't seen this one quite yet. Obviously a pretty powerful limited card, and there are definitely some constructed applications here, but haven't really seen much of this card yet. And this is the kind of thing that I actually like about Justin's deck because we don't know if this deck is built optimally yet, but you can actually see kind of the gears turning in his head about what he's trying to accomplish, and it seems like the cards are there to try to accomplish something like this.
There's a lot of interlocking pieces, that's for sure.
See Courser Krufix going to come down. Forest going to be taken off the top here, put into play. VanMeter's going to go back up to 19. You see Aura Spells, you cast cost 1 less than Heroic. When you target the hero, it's going to get +1/+1 counter. So 2 mana 2/2 with a lot of upside, as now Domri is going to fight that thing. Courser is going to take that down in combat. And now VanMeter going to likely attack here in just a moment. Actually going to hang back on defense because he wants to protect his Domri from that Mutavault.
Well, Courser's also new to the party. This turn.
So. Oh, yeah, my fault. Domri came down turn 2. My apologies.
I agree with you. Even if Courser could attack, I do not believe Chris would attack this turn. And this is what I was talking about. This opening is so tough for Justin. There's so many removal spells and implied removal spells. And a lot of his deck is trying to get A plus B into play alongside one another.
And it seems like John Monsters does a really nice job of breaking up A plus B kind of decks, especially ones that rely on creatures. But, I mean, they even have non-creature removal, too. A card like Dreadbore, things of that nature. Here's a Hopeful Eidolon.
Black definitely gives you some flexibility that you lose when you're just in the green-red build. Putrefy, Abrupt Decay, Golgari Charm, these are very flexible cards that help out your post-board matchups, often dramatically.
Hopeful Eidolon and pass will be the turn here for McWhorter. VanMeter does draw his copy of Putrefy, going to turn over a copy of Overgrown Tomb, so now he's found some black mana as well. Courser coursing along.
You're seeing a lot of synergies here. The Courser Domri synergy. Information about the top card of your deck, very valuable when Domri's going.
Seems like it's been a while since we've seen this. You know, it really kind of peaked at St. Louis, a couple months back, where Monsters was everywhere. VanMeter making the top 4 of that tournament, Ken Ketter making the top 8 that weekend as well, and just a very traditional Green Red Monsters deck actually winning that tournament. And that was really at its peak, and it really did decline after that, but I think that's because people finally started taking the deck very seriously. Domri going to tick up, obviously staring at a Temple Abandoned right in the face, so that's not going anywhere.
And Chris with so much removal in his hand.
Suda wants to cast this turn. Looks like he's up to something here. You see the mortars. It looks like he wants to just fire this off, take care of the Hopeful Eidolon. I think it's all about, for Chris, just keeping things off of the table. I think that's the most important thing here for him. Don't let any combinations get started, even though he does have a lot of removal. Mortars might not get much better than that.
He's nowhere near being able to overload it.
Yeah.
So what else is he going to do with it, really?
Courser does come across here for 2. McWhorter's going to go down to 18. You see Elvish Mystic and Mutavault back on defense, and the ability to cast a Putrefy right now for VanMeter, along with the Golgari Charm as well. So he is in a very, very nice spot here.
A lot of insurance against the potential responses that Justin has here.
One thing we talk about a lot with these white aggressive decks, be it black-white, be it the red-white shells that people can play, it's just how glutted they are at the 3-drop with Bramaz, with Spear, with a Johnny, and all that stuff. It's really hard to say which is the best of the bunch. You take a look here at McWhorter's deck list, there are no Bramazes here, which it makes sense given what his deck is trying to accomplish, but is that right? I mean, that's hard to say.
Well, Bramaz still hasn't shown up very much at all in these sort of base white aggro decks. It's appeared more as a sideboard card or as a threat for more mid-range, Naya-style decks. I think that Bramaz doesn't really synergize that well with Ajani or Spear relative to how those cards synergize with your 1 and 2 mana creatures.
Sure. Athreos just the turn here for McWhorter before passing the turn back. Kind of the same problem that it had in game number 1. Just it doesn't catch you up when you're behind.
Nope.
It's just kind of, you're taking a turn off to put something powerful in play, yes, but, it doesn't do anything to solve the problem. And there are many here on VanMeter's side of the table, as Courser is still just coursing along right now.
To me, the bigger issue is just that the text box isn't going to be relevant this game, most likely. Chris has plenty of light to play with to simply say, okay, well, that's fine. I'll pay 3.
Courser gonna come on in. Gonna play an Overgrown Tomb, untapped, 2 triggers from the Courser, so no gain, no loss there, as Temple of Abandon will come into play as well. Been a little while, it feels like, since we've seen Courser really do its thing in combination with Domri.
Justin is one of the rare decks in Standard that can't really kill a Courser.
Yeah.
And also cares about attacking. So
yeah. That 4 toughness is actually difficult for him to get through. It's kind of like a brick wall against him, honestly.
Got a lot of 2/2s, a lot of 2/1s, a lot of 1/1s.
Our first copy of Manic Influence does come into play for the day here for Justin as his 5th land drop. But you can see, he knows that he's in some trouble here. His hand isn't great. He's got another copy of Athreos. He's got a Spear of Heliod. A couple of Mutavaults down there, but nothing too crazy going on here for him.
And the biggest thing, of course, is that Chris just has so many answers in his hand to anything Justin can really do here.
Again, there will certainly be situations where Athreos is a fantastic Magic card, and it's certainly at its best against these Sphinx's Revelation strategies that people talk about because it's great against Supreme Verdict, but, the card's got to be good against other things, too, and I think that's where part of the problem with it lies. Now, if you can't turn it on consistently, it's a whole different story here, as now Devotion count is up to 4 for it because of the Spear. It's still going to be tough, though.
Justin's deck is the type of deck where he can turn it on, but he can't necessarily turn it on against resistance. If you look at his deck list, there's plenty of double mana text boxes and so forth, but you're seeing this happen now in the post-board games where Can he actually get 7 Devotion into play? Possibly, but he's going to have to weather the storm of so many removal spells from Chris.
Yeah. So after playing the Spear, I think Chris is maybe considering if he wants to cast a Putrefy or Golgari Charm, maybe to get that Spear off the table and keep the Devotion count a little bit lower, as that's essentially Justin's turn. It's just Spear and passes. Mutavault attacking isn't a thing that's going to really take place here, so VanMeter is going to tap 3 mana. Looks like Putrefy is the choice here to take care of this Spear. Because let's not forget, it is an enchantment and an artifact. So bye-bye Spear.
This is pretty compelling. Chris wants to keep the Golgari Charm in his hand because it's, if anything, a more flexible removal spell against Justin's deck than the Putrefy is.
Courser, the top card, after drawing a copy of Temple of Abandon. There are, I believe, 3 copies of Temple of Abandon in Chris's hand right now. So first he's going to take this up. He'll take the Courser to the grip. Top card now is another copy of Putrefy. More removal spells here for the Jund Monsters player.
Looks like he has all 4 temples.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is all 4. A lot of scrying that can take place here. How do you feel about Jund Monsters as a choice this particular weekend, or just monsters in general?
I think it's a great week 1 deck. I think this deck is very powerful against kind of random creature strategies. You're going to see a lot of that week 1. If you think back a couple of months, the mono blacklist really struggled because they didn't know what mixture of Bioblight, Ultimate Price, Doomblade, Devour Flesh they should have been playing. Jund Monsters, because it's just a proactive deck, doesn't have any of these dilemmas. It just plays its shell of powerful threats and a couple removal spells. And to me, that seems a lot better than trying to play this guessing game week 1 of what threats are going to be appearing in people's decks.
He's an attacker for 4 from VanMeter. Going to follow that up with a Courser, play a Temple. 3 triggers from Courser, so he'll gain himself some life. He's going to scry, leave that Putrefy on top, as he doesn't feel there's a better mystery draw coming than just that removal spell. It looks like he's going to happily pass the turn back over to McWhorter, who is very far behind at this point. I'm not sure there's any catching up, especially with that Putrefy on top of the deck.
Really no removal spells in Justin 75, so once he gets behind like this, he's basically banking on Ethereal Armor plus Lifelink or something along those lines catching him up, and he's really far away from being able to assemble something like that.
Yeah, and it's not like, McWhorter doesn't have the ability to play a lot of removal spells. Of course, he's playing a black deck, so he has access to cards like Doomblade, Orzhov Charm, things of that nature. Banishing Light, which he does have 2 copies of. There are definitely removal spells available to him, but it's all about finding that right balance, because you take a look at his deck list, he's very creature heavy and very removal light, but that's a decision that he's obviously chosen to make. It's just one that's not working out in this particular matchup.
Orzhov Charm seems great in Justin's list because he's in the market even for return a creature and all creature enchantments to its owner's hand.
Yeah.
Because he has an Ethereal Armor skeleton going on here as well. So Orzhov Charm seems like a great inclusion to his list.
Dom, we're going to take up Pool of Chronos to the grip. Yeah, it's like I kind of forgot that Orzhov Charm was actually a card. And so I just thought about it there, kind of in that example of removal spells that are available. And then you think of the text of the card, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of relevant text for that card in this particular deck. So, maybe Justin just forgot about it or something like that. You don't know because we obviously weren't there for the deck building process. But, I would be interested in that kind of card in this particular kind of deck.
The thing is, Justin's list is all about enchantments.
Yep.
He's not even playing the full playset of Banishing Lights. So I can understand the logic of, well, I would at least want to have 4 Banishing Lights first before I even touched Orzhov Charm.
Sure.
But it does seem very powerful to me in this list because most of the time Orzhov Charm is just a 1-mode card. In some lists, it's a 2-mode card. Justin feels like the first list I've really seen where it could realistically be a 3-mode card.
Thought sees the draw here from McWhorter, and he says, no more, thank you. Chris VanMeter is going to win round 1 with Jund Monsters over Justin McWhorter with Black-White Aggro. Number 2 on our leaderboard, but in reality, number 1 as far as the Players' Championship invite is concerned. Thus far, off to a beautiful start here in Cincinnati.
Good opening, and you got to see